Hi, everybody. Welcome to Boomer Time. I'm your host, Nancy Cogar, as you know, or at least I hope you know. I'm going to be sharing some headlines that I think are especially important for you aging individuals and caregivers out there. But before I do that, I wanted to share something that happened to me really over the last week. And I told you I'm in this caregiving journey too, and this is something I think is worth sharing and worth taking note about. So, my mother, she is 84, and she had some surgery. It was supposed to be a minor surgery, not anything significant, but to clean out some arthritis and some other things around one of her knees that was causing a lot of pain. And we were hoping that it would help with her mobility. So she was under anesthesia, and it took about an hour here at a local hospital. And when she came into recovery, that's when the problem started. So she didn't seem to wake up from the anesthesia the way she had in the past. In fact, 5 days went by, and she was, for lack of a better way of putting it, she was delusional. She was making up conversations that she had supposedly with people that didn't exist. She was accusing me of all kinds of things, accusing the staff. It was a surprise, and it was difficult. So this happened to me and my family, and I just wanted to use it as a note to share with you, both because, like I said, I'm in this with you, but also to take note. So there are times when older adults have surgeries, and they do become delusional post surgery. Most of the time, it wears off in about a couple hours. Sometimes it takes a couple days. Sometimes it's a long term problem. Luckily for my mother, it does not appear to be the case, but I thought it was important to share this. Um, Take note, talk to your physicians about this, know about this as part of, a planned procedure. I think it's important to talk about these things. So, in the meantime, if you've experienced something like this, maybe a family member, so let me know. I'd be interested to see how you handled that, how it turned out. It must have been scary. I know it was scary for me and scary for my mom. I was concerned about, you know, maybe we had to take an alternate plan B as far as what her care would look like. You just don't know. So I wanted to share that first, and I hope you take note, and I hope that's helpful. So now we're going to go to some headlines. So there's a story out that is not great news, um, but it's important news, like I said. Um, there are a record number of people, older people over age 55, that are homeless. Homeless. This is a record high. And it got my attention because it's also supposed to triple in just a few years, 5 years, in fact, 2030. 140,000 Americans. They cannot afford housing because of the increase in the cost of living. Uh, Medicines are expensive. That's a top concern of a lot of older adults. Medical treatments can be complicated. Of course, there's a lot of dementia, cognitive disorders. Those can lead to issues of diabetes, heart disease, all these things. And when you're on a fixed income, that can be especially challenging. So I thought that was interesting and worth mentioning. Of course, my ultimate response to all of that is we've got to plan more like a community, right? We've got to plan so that these types of things are prevented, especially when it comes to your loved one. Another not so optimistic story, but important nonetheless. The Centers for Disease Control are reporting that the death rate from falls at home, has increased 41%. That's significant. And the thing is, most of these falls are completely preventable. I have talked about this on the podcast too. You've got to go around the house and make sure the house is safe. You've got to look for possible trip hazards, whether it's things that are in the way of the path or loose carpets. You put in grab bars. You're going to stay at home longer if you put those types of things in place and avoid a fall. A fall can be the primary reason why you can't go home. So let's pay attention to this. I do. So let's make sure that if we haven't done it already, let's do a safety assessment of the house. And I've got some resources on my website, nancycogar.com, that can help you with that kind of assessment. Take a look for that, and I think those things are helpful. So I wanted to also debunk something that I saw in the news, which I'm sure is making a lot of people stressed out. So there was a story that the federal government, the new Trump administration, planned to make it tougher for older people to get their driver's licenses. Not true. I will tell you that the states, in large part, are doing that, but the federal government's not in charge of issuing driver's licenses. So this is not an accurate story, so don't worry about it. But I will say that, Tennessee, my state, does have new laws where you can only have a renewal of a driver's license every 5 years if you're over age 65. And it is for some of those reasons. Vision test, cognitive assessment. They want to ask questions about things that may interfere with your driving, like blackouts, diabetic shocks and seizures and dementia. That just makes sense, doesn't it? I think it does. But I know driving is one of those issues that sometimes can be tough to give up. But know that the federal government is not or does not have that on its docket, but depending on what state you live in, the state may. So that's just a few headlines for you. I've got a couple others that I think are interesting to take note. I'm going to just take a quick breaky poo, and I'll be back in just a minute. Well, welcome back to Boomer Time. I'm glad you're here. I'm sharing some of the stories I've seen in the news that I think are particularly important to us in this Boomer Time community. So you see something and you have questions about it, feel free to send it to me, nancycogar.com. I love hearing from you all. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what your questions are. That helps me to help you. So I wanted to touch on some of the laws that have been enacted to combat a lot of the scams, a lot of the predatory actions, exploitation, in other words, of both elderly and vulnerable adults. I've talked a lot about scams recently, and it's one of my primary concerns. They're just devastating. And unfortunately, as I was going to mention here, a lot of times the ones committing the financial exploitation, if they're not scammers, they're family members. So that's an unfortunate reality. But, sometimes it can be difficult to even determine whether someone's being exploited or not. What do you do if you think that? Or should you report it? What, you're not sure? Should you? How do you stop it? How do you talk about it? I thought it was important to maybe touch on some of these things today as we're talking about headlines, just as a follow up to my scams prevention that we talked about. Remember, I've got a scam prevention playlist, so you can share that with a friend or watch it. There's a lot of great information in there. And I want you to be protected from being a victim of one of these guys. So make sure to watch it. Let's talk about elderly and vulnerable adult financial exploitation. A lot of states have enacted statutes to penalize people for misusing things that are not theirs and that belong to older people or vulnerable disabled people. Tennessee here did that in 2017. They enacted a statute, which is a criminal act. You will face criminal action, and it depends on the amount of the amount involved. But it is a very serious thing. So we're talking about people, elderly, over age 65, or as I mentioned, vulnerable adults. So that would be someone over 18 that has a mental or physical disability and would be unable to manage their own personal affairs on their own and maybe be exploited because of that. There are some serious penalties, like I said. Sometimes it can be a felony for you're stealing large amounts. I've seen a couple stories in the headlines recently too, just about caregivers, others who are not, they're misappropriating money, property that's not theirs for their own benefit. That's what exploitation is, right? So it is the improper use of those funds, including funds that would otherwise go to someone's care that paid by the government. So it doesn't even have to be the elderly adults' funds. It could be funds that are supposed to go to help them. So this includes, like I said, a lot of the scams. So watch that scam prevention playlist. Unfortunately, this is something that is prevalent in the state of Tennessee in 2021, which these are old numbers. I'd love to see some new numbers from the state. $32 million in exploited monies from these individuals. $36 billion in the U.S. So what do you do? What do you do if you suspect, this kind of exploitation? What are some of the signs that you may see? A lot of these things happen behind closed doors too. It's hard to detect sometimes. So some of the signs I took notes of were, obviously a sudden change in someone's financial condition. You may not have access to that, but if you're a banker, I've got lots of friends and fellow advocates that work in banks in the area, and they pay attention to these things, which they should, right? What about activity in accounts when you have somebody's recovering from surgery and you start seeing big debits from their account? That sure is a telltale sign. And if you go to visit someone, maybe, you've got an outreach with your church and you're going to visit homebound individuals. If you notice that there's no food in the house, maybe the lights aren't working, maybe the electricity is off, maybe the house is messy. These can be real signs that something is wrong. So what do? Well, you would call 911 if it's an emergency, right? Or you can report it to APS, which is Adult Protective Services. And interestingly enough, you don't have to be certain. You can report things as a potential problem. This is for the entire state, so sometimes the response is slow, but that's the procedure that they put in place. And me as a lawyer, I have a duty to report things like this if I see evidence of that. Um, there are duties on certain individuals. So, but I think as a duty as a person, right? That if you notice somebody is in trouble, you should report it. Maybe you disagree, I don't know. But that's my opinion. And if you don't agree with me, let me know. so, so those are the stories that I wanted to cover. I think these are meaningful. I think that they're important to take note of, as I said. And they're things that if we don't start doing something about it, they're not going to get better, right? So that's the obvious thing here. I do have a couple questions that came in since the last episode, and I love those questions. So I wanted to spend some time on those. And you know what? As I share them, I would love to get your input too. What do you think? You know, where do you think the problem lies? What's a solution to make a difference in these areas? That's part of why we have a civic-minded community. We're supposed to be involved. So I'm encouraging you for that. So I'm going to take another quick break, but when I come back, we'll talk about these couple questions. And I've got a secret that I'm not going to share, but I'll tell you a little bit about it that's coming up. So I'll be right back. Welcome back to Boomer Time. Almost forgot where I was. No. I just want to share another little personal story. I met a really delightful woman from the Chattanooga area. I was traveling the week before last, and you know who you are on 18A, right? On the plane from Charlotte to Chattanooga. No, just wonderful woman, and it's funny how things work out sometimes. She sat right next to me and started talking about how she had been caring for her mother, how she had gone all the way to Oklahoma. Her mom was in the hospital. She was worried about her. Her sister lives too far away, and they're playing kind of tag between taking care of mama. Well, she didn't know what I did for a living, but it just seemed like the right kind of connection. So we talked a little bit longer, and then I shared about Boomer Time. I shared about what I'm passionate about doing, and just wonderful woman. So she said she was going to be watching the show, so I just say, hi, 18A, how you doing? So I love hearing your stories. So I loved her story, and I love hearing your story. So please share them. I may share them on the show. If you don't want me to share it on the show, let me know that, right? Maybe you've got a question about something. If I can help answer it, I will. And speaking of shows, you know, we are terribly close to episode 100. How about that? And I am going to celebrate when we reach 100. You know, we're working towards 3 years of having the podcast out there, and that's cause for celebration. How about you help me with that? Subscribe, you know, share it with a friend. I want to get those numbers up as we approach 100. So you, by doing that, by subscribing, sharing, and liking, you can help me with that. If you don't know how to do that, ask a friend and then do it, and then have them do it too. So a couple other questions that people have asked me that I wanted to share before we say goodbye today. Here in Chattanooga, of course, there was a senior center at Eastgate, which was closed last year. And when it was closed, the city had promised to open a new senior center. Maybe you've heard that. Well, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for a new senior center. And, you know, it's unfortunate that the one at Eastgate closed, because that's such a central location. It's on the bus line, lots of parking, easy access. But we haven't seen anything new, and we're still hoping to see that. There was one that the county Hamilton County just opened a new senior center in Harrison. So if you live out that way, that's something new that you might explore. Let me know what you think of it. And if you live in the city, tell me what you think needs to be done to help the quality of life of older adults. Maybe you've got a family member that lives in the city of Chattanooga. Maybe you are an older adult in the city of Chattanooga. Let me know what you think. There have been some changes. Of course, I remember a lot of folks relied on silver sneakers, through Medicare at the Y to get active and stay active. That's no longer available. So what are you using? What do you have out there that might help another? If there's something, share it. We need to be connected as a community. So I think that is important, as you know. Last story. It was a question, and kind of a difficult question, actually. But someone was asking, can my parent get forced out, right, of assisted living? Yes, usually there's a couple reasons for that. I only see that really in extreme cases. Sometimes transitions can be difficult, but really the primary concerns are, of course, this individual needs more help than the facility can provide. That's cause for a transition for the benefit of that person. The other would be the person, the resident, is disruptive, maybe even dangerous to others or to themselves. I hear about that from time to time, and that can happen with dementia patients. So if they are not in a specific place where they could be a danger to themselves or another resident, the facility is going to take some action to protect the residents, the staff, and other residents. So I say that with a cautious yes, but it is very circumstance driven. And I will try to have some people who have experienced this or are in charge of those kind of decisions on the show so we can talk through that more. I'll do that coming up. So I did want to share my secret. I have a secret. It's going to be great, and I'm super excited about it. I'm not going to share the details, though, but it's a big deal, and it involves Boomer Time, and it is going to help so many of you out there even more. So at least that's my hope. So stick with me because we are entering, like I said, up to episode 100, and this great thing is on the horizon. And like I said, I am very excited about it, and I'll probably be able to share more in a couple weeks. So guess what? You'll just have to keep listening. So I hope you do that anyway. But yeah, very exciting. So there are lots of resources on the website. I know I've mentioned that before, but I just want to let you know if there's something you're concerned about, you go there. I'm sure you're probably going to find something that will help and give you some guidance. If you don't see anything, ask me, and I will see if I can get you something. I'll post it on the website. That's the whole reason I'm doing this, folks. And like I said, go to nancycogar.com. That's my website. You can reach me there. You can make an appointment there for a strategy session. You can find all those resources, and you can listen to the podcast. So it's a great place to go. And we're going to have some updates to the website, too, coming up. So we've got all kinds of things going on, and I'm so excited about it. So what a chock full of episode that we had here today, and I'm glad to share this information. But in the meantime, I hope you will plan specifically, plan properly, because that's going to make a difference in your future and in your family's future. That's the lesson that I leave you with every day. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time here on Boomer Time.